120 years ago, Kennecott was born. 1903 to 1913, an orphan from Missouri establishes what would later become the largest copper mine in the world. A new century arrives. As technology advances at breakneck speed, copper is in higher demand than ever before. Daniel C. Jackling seizes the opportunity to mine where even General Electric feared to tread. In 1903, he sparks a mining revolution, founding the Utah Copper Company alongside Enos Wall. In 1906, the Garfield Smelter and Mascot Tunnel are completed, bringing it closer to a fully integrated mining operation. Next, Jackling pioneers the open pit method, cementing his status as the father of Utah copper. The 1910s bring the Kennecott name to Utah for the first time, followed by new company railways connecting communities and helping them to thrive. 1913 to 1923. This was a decade defined by Kennecott victories, at home and on the battlefields of Europe. As America played its part in the First World War, our copper proved to be the nation's lifeline. Annual ore production doubled to 143 million tons, strengthening America's front line. And at home, Kennecott was writing its own legends. After a frantic manhunt, police managed to trap alleged murderer Rafael Lopez in a Kennecott mine, but his body was never found, and to this day, locals still claim to have seen his ghost. Then, in 1916, Kennecott took over the El Teniente copper mine in Chile, acquiring more mines and other companies. The organization continued to expand, even during the recession. And by the early 1920s, it wasn't just operations that were growing. Arriving from places as far afield as Japan, a booming population of 15,000 was to be found around the Bingham Canyon, enjoying epic views from their homes in its rocky walls. 1923 to 1933, a time of triumph and tragedy. As the 20s roared on, Bingham Canyon set the standard for modernization. Froth flotation replaced gravity separation at the mills, and steam gave way to electric power, starting with the landmark decision to introduce electric shovels. This was a mining first that saved 10 cents a ton and countless hours of repairs. Then, electric locomotives replaced steam engines altogether, dramatically improving productivity. And as the mines were transformed, so was the town, replacing Bingham's 5-mile-long wooden sidewalks with modern materials. But it was also a decade of challenges. The Great Depression forced operations to pause. A landslide at the mine claimed 39 lives. And a fire at Highland Boy made 300 people homeless. Yet through it all, the community showed it could rally together. The Utah Copper Company funded recovery efforts. Its firemen worked tirelessly alongside the brave fire department, and local churches made sure no one went without food and support. 1933 to 1943, a time that will be remembered for great adversity and the heroes that would overcome it. When the economy crashed in 1929, so did the demand for copper. Yet while other mines laid off workers, the Utah Copper Companies kept theirs fed and working, helping the district push through the Great Depression. But the journey was far from straightforward. Floods at Little Valley Canyon put lives in danger. Mine workers and the community worked around the clock to install dams, saving Magnatown from disaster when the floods returned. Now, the recovery was forging ahead. The Kennecott Copper Corporation assumed full ownership of the Utah Copper Company and took its place as a world-leading copper producer. Bingham Town became Bingham City, and through sheer grit, the community had put the Depression behind them. But there was no time for rest. As a world war loomed on the horizon, Kennecott was tested once again, and they were ready. As the men left for war, women took over the mining. In all, the mines provided a third of the copper used by the Allied forces, achieving a new production record of 19 million tons as our soldiers pushed on to victory. 1943 to 1953, with the war still raging, 50 megawatts powered Kennecott through its fifth decade. The Kennecott Copper Corporation's electric power plant took much of the strain out of mining work. The first collective bargaining agreement was signed. It protected wages and working conditions. Soon after, the war finally came to a close. But while spirits were high, copper was in short supply. So Kennecott set about sourcing new materials around the world, mining gold in South Africa and titanium in Canada. Closer to home, Kennecott was innovating at pace. New diesel-electric trains and an electrolytic refinery were introduced at Bingham Canyon, raising the bar once again. 1953 to 1963. By the 50s, Kennecott was stepping up and stepping out on its own. It was now the biggest copper producer in the United States, responsible for almost half of the nation's output. In fact, Kennecott had produced more copper than any single mine in history, and they were putting on a show in more ways than one. Their educational films entertained locals at the new neighborhood theater, a cornerstone of the community. It proved to be almost as popular as Kennecott's work. The decade's space race had massively boosted demand, as copper was an essential material for the construction of rockets. So Kennecott set to work, rapidly upgrading. An expansion of the Magna electric power plant was followed by a third haulage tunnel, and finally, the purchase of the Garfield smelter. And as Kennecott took production to new heights, astronaut John H. Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, 1963 to 1973. In 1963, the ore grade at Bingham Mine was declining. It was time for bold action, and Kennecott's leaders were ready. They set about a $100 million program of modernization, with 79 new haulage trucks and major new plants. Ore production was increased to 108,000 tons a day, and Kennecott continued to diversify too, acquiring iron, lead, and coal companies. At the same time, the environmental movement was growing at pace, triggered by a disastrous oil spill in Santa Barbara. It prompted the government to introduce a raft of clean air policies, including new standards for copper smelters. Kennecott embraced the moment. No expense was spared as they developed new technology that would enable them to meet the new air quality standards. Then they raised the bar again, investing to transform the Garfield smelter into the world's most advanced. 1973 to 1983. In 1974, Kennecott completed the Garfield smokestack, built to comply with the new Clean Air Act. At over 1,200 feet, it was a towering achievement. But copper prices were once again in decline, and Kennecott was losing the support of the community. Acquiring the town of Lark as a reclamation site, locals were forced to relocate. 81-year-old Hilda Grabner led the protests, and Kennecott did the honorable thing, granting residents the compensation they deserved. But it was clear that big changes were needed. Chairman Thomas Barrow led the revival, starting with the completion of the Garfield smelter. A radical rebuilding at Bingham Canyon followed, dramatically improving efficiency. The sale of Kennecott to the Standard Oil Company of Ohio saved the business from a deep recession. Then in 1983, $23 million of investment was approved to further expand Utah's copper supply. Replacing rail operations with trucks cut costs, boosted productivity, and helped get Kennecott on the road to better things. 1983 to 1993. The Bingham Pit was officially recognized as a place of historic importance in 1984, acknowledging more than 100 years of service to the community. This was to be a rare bright spot in a difficult few years for Kennecott. A severe recession and a harsh winter saw production drop by 2/3 in 1984. Though as usual, fortunes would improve. Workers were slowly recalled, and the Bingham Canyon mine reopened. Then, as computers found their way into American homes, the latest technology was transforming Kennecott mining. A new mill, crushing and conveyor systems were installed, along with new trucks that made rail haulage redundant. Then in 1989, Kennecott was acquired by Rio Tinto, and as the Cold War ended, they set to work on major modernization. By 1993, Bingham Canyon was using cutting-edge technology to build the world's cleanest smelter, 1993 to 2003. As the internet was transforming our world, a new diamond mine dramatically expanded Kennecott's. Yet even bigger changes were around the corner. New chairman Bob Cooper announced he would split Kennecott into 3 separate operations, each with its own president and staff. Soon after, Kennecott launched a major environmental cleanup, and the smelter and refinery modernization in Utah was finally complete. And they were giving back to the community too. The Inland Sea Shorebird Reserve was created to offset tailings impoundment. Then in 2003, a landmark moment. The Bingham mine was now 100 years old, and Kennecott could reflect on just how far they'd come. They had become an economic powerhouse and a backbone of the community, employing thousands of people over 5 generations. 2003 to 2013. This decade brought a landmark achievement for Kennecott. Their plan for dramatic expansion was approved, extending the mine's life to 2029. At the same time, Kennecott was digging deeper. Venturing into underground mining, they were forging their future, thousands of feet below. And Rio Tinto was making its mark on the local community, launching their sponsorship of the Real Salt Lake soccer team. Rio Tinto's support was behind the construction of the team's iconic stadium. In 2012, the Olympic Games became a stage for Kennecott, with victorious athletes adorned with the gold and silver of Bingham Canyon. But a hugely positive decade was about to take a turn for the worse. In 2013, an immense landslide devastated the pit. The impact spread 1.5 miles, destroying a vast section of the only major road and left the production fleet stranded. It was a major blow, but thanks to the innovative early warning system, all workers were safely evacuated. By rising to the occasion, Kennecott recovered against the odds. 2013 to 2023. In 2013, the challenges arising from April's landslide seemed insurmountable. Experts predicted it would take a year for Kennecott to recover, while losing millions in revenue. But incredibly, Kennecott resumed operations after just 17 days. It was a remarkable feat, followed by a critical risk management program that would transform processes and dramatically improve safety. And with the climate an equal priority, we were making a bold push into cleaner energy. In 2019, we shut down coal production, turning instead to renewable electricity. It was a brave move that saw Kennecott become the first producer to be awarded the Copper Mark. And in 2021, we were making headlines again, taking action to protect our future. We became just the 2nd U.S. producer of tellurium, a vital component of solar panels. With substantial new investment, we've secured operations at Kennecott until at least 2032, and we have more ore still waiting underground than we've ever mined in our 120-year history. An idea dreamed up by an orphan from Missouri is now powering American industry and a driving force behind a cleaner future. We are Kennecott proud of what's behind us and just as excited about what's to come.